The Kingdom of Farrelott is powered by many different sources, and while most people point towards things like Flintstone, it's small in comparison to the primary driving force of everything: servitude. There are a dozen different flavors of servitude used across the entire kingdom, whether that be the basic physical labor seen in the underworks with bugs like loam, or maybe something you haven't fully appreciated: the use and abuse of the silkflies. To fully understand the importance of silkflies, we first have to cover two pressing questions. What are they, and where do they come from? Answering that question will take some effort, so first let's travel back long before Hornet came to the kingdom, back to a time Grandmother Silk had first arrived in Farrelott, when four kingdoms controlled their respective corners, and all sat unprepared for the arrival of a foreign god. In these days, things were much more intact than what we see today, and everyone mostly minded their own business. The Karak, ruled by Crust King Khan, sat to the left in their then flourishing lands flowing with clear water. The right of the kingdom was home to the Scar tribe and their queen Carmelita, while above them, the twin princes, no, not these guys, lived peacefully with their kind in Verdania, the citizens probably passing the time by drawing yaoi of their leaders. And finally, next to the Karak sat Shellwood, prospering silently and passively thanks to Nylith. They have a whole separate history that I'll cover some other time, but for this video's purpose, all that matters is that their peace was soon disturbed, and eventually crushed, as Grandmother Silk took up residence in Farrelott, creating the Weavers, and the Weavers creating the Citadel. At some point between the Weavers' birth and their departure from the kingdom after their rebellion, they created a tool known as the Silk Siphon. One that, through a process we haven't yet seen, has the ability to extract the silken soul of a bug, leaving them disembodied and in the form we now know. While it's not really in question if this tool was made by the Weavers, since it's pretty obvious it has the same design as all their other structures, at just what point it was made is unclear. Since I'll be discussing many events in relation to each other, we'll use this timeline to place events correctly. As far as I know, it's pretty accurate, and it was posted on a website called 12 Grams of Carbon. I don't know anything about them beyond this article, by the way, and this isn't a promotion or anything. I'm just doing what I learned in high school and citing my sources. But regarding the construction of the silk siphon, it was probably made sometime around here. Due to the presence of silkflies in Carmelita's area, it was likely used before the Weavers left and everyone else died. Though how they got here, I'm not 100% sure. In the early days before the siphon was really put to use by the Citadel, not too much was known about it, like what bugs or creatures were put through the procedure and why. The Citadel and the other kingdoms were always a little standoffish, if not openly hostile to each other, but they were known to make deals as seen by the statue in Nylith's area, said to be made by the Citadel, though reluctantly. They also did some weird deal with Verdania, where the Green Prince's boyfriend was given to the Citadel to mold the cogwork dancers, but I'll get back to that later. I mention all of that to say it's possible the silkflies in the Scar area are there due to a trade made between them and the Citadel. Though if that's not the case, it's possible there exists some other way to create silkflies that remains unknown. Now, we'll jump forward a bit to a time after Grandmother Silk was imprisoned and the Weavers left, when the Citadel's control was turned over to the lesser bugs. Silk was obviously always important, but this era cranked it up a notch. As the higher-ups of the Citadel began harvesting silk from Grandmother Silk's cocoon, it slowly worked its way into basically everything, even raining down from the Citadel and into Greymore. This was at a time before the Haunting, so silk didn't yet make bugs go all insane and lose control of themselves. But as the conductors, probably taking inspiration from the Weavers, discovered, it had an unexpected application, artificially extending the lives of bugs. Seeing as the conductors wanted to preserve the Citadel and their positions forever, they eventually created the White Ward, meant to both remove the silk from dead or dying bugs and inject it into others to prolong their life. Not for any good or benevolent reason, of course, but just so they could work them longer. They even went a step farther and banned death, writing on a message board and stating the Oath of the White Ward. While song must be sung, none may falter. Infirmity, sickness, death, all are banished from our Citadel. Following their decree, the Citadel turned the White Ward, which was likely at first a hospital of sorts, into what it is today. Dark halls heavily coated in aged silk and discarded implements. The area has a ton of wheelchairs, sick beds, and piles of bodies, showing the scale of operations down here, as sick, old, and dying bugs were sent to perform a duty most sacred, or in other words, be recycled. Like I said a second ago, since silk had made its way into everything, including the bugs themselves, the conductors didn't want to let all that good silk go to waste, so they created a closed loop of silk harvesting, which probably went something like this. First, they would be brought to White Wards to inject the silk harvested from Grandmother Silk into bugs to extend their usefulness in maintaining the song, keeping her asleep. After a bug had served for however many centuries and was beginning to slow down, they would then be brought back, maybe cared for a time, and then eventually brought up to the silk siphon. Here, in the last step of the procedure, the silk they had consumed ages ago was forcefully ripped from their shells in an incredibly painful process. Though there was an unintended side effect probably, the conductors may not have planned for, as it seems an imprint of, or even the soul itself, had been embedded in the silk, leading to the creation, en masse, of silkflies. Now that we've covered what the silkflies are and their history, two more questions present themselves to us. Why are they so important, and what's their purpose? Well, unknowingly, an answer to those were told to bugs sent to Whiteward before going through the siphon, though admittedly they were pretty lax on the details. Stated in one choral commandment found to the right of the siphon, it says, "Bug of voice grown hoarse, or shell fallen frail, you have been selected for a duty most sacred. Become our light, our guide in darkness, that others worthy may climb to join the holy song." Though it is still likely a mystery to most bugs, the truth behind nearly every single lamp across Farloom is known to us. Each one containing a fly is actually powered by the disembodied souls of a bug who could not find peace even in death, now being put to use in order to light the path toward the Citadel for other bugs to follow. While many, if not most, who went into Whiteward and the Silk Siphon knew they would serve beyond their shells, others weren't as enthusiastic or even really consenting. Playing the needle in front of the siphon reveals this, as formless dialogue pops up, questioning why they must devote themselves eternally and why they must suffer. So is that it then? Is the main purpose of silkflies to just be a light bulb because the Citadel doesn't want to bother wasting the money buying LEDs? Well, long before you ever even reach the Citadel, the answer to that question is given during the fight with the fourth chorus in Farfields. Once beating it, as its dying animation plays, dozens of silkflies can be seen escaping from its head. And going from its needle dialogue that has lines that say, "We are one, we are many," the obvious conclusion is that silkflies are somehow powering the fourth chorus. There are other members of the chorus, though, as they lie dormant in the underworks. Their needle dialogue laments about having to serve beyond shell, echoing the siphon dialogue, and they also mention something most silkflies do, the desire to be remembered. Above the underworks, past the endless layers of machinery and metal structures, is the cogwork core, and throughout we can find multiple different cogwork constructs. Each and every one of these, when destroyed, releases a silkfly, and like the dock workers in Deep Docks, nearly every construct shares the same needle dialogue, saying, "Am I who? Lift it, fix it. Me? The core holy, work eternal, to mend, to serve." There are some exceptions for this though. For instance, cogwork haulers for some reason have no needle dialogue despite having a silkfly inside. The smaller version of the choruses, called cogwork clappers, have multiple silkflies similar to their larger brothers, and the cogflies Hornet uses as a tool don't use silkflies for power, even though they still sing. So that's one point to Hornet, I guess. Standing apart from the basic workers, though still constructs powered by silkflies, are the 12th Architect, the Sentinels, and maybe the cogwork dancers. Starting with the 12th Architect, they are the beings responsible for the creation of most other constructs, though as time went on, they forgot how to make others of their own kind. Due to them forgetting how to make other constructs, the 12th is the last of their line, and slowly dying. After we grab the Architect's crest, we can find them lying dead at their workbench with a silkfly who is most likely their soul, resting on their own head. Unlike the other normal constructs, their dialogue doesn't have any lines wishing to be remembered or wondering who they are or mentioning the pain. Instead, they seem wholly absorbed into their positions and their servitude. This trait is also found in the second Sentinel, who mainly just talks about being alone and missing their siblings. Though they really don't need to feel alone, seeing as these 4 silkflies found here and here are very likely to be the souls of the other Sentinels, simply waiting for their kin to join them, which I am happy to help with. And the last construct that needs to be discussed is the cogwork dancers. The dancers are pretty clearly modeled in the image of the clover dancers of Verdania. Back in the days when the Citadel and the Kingdom were both alive and active, an important deal was made between them, where the lover of the Green Prince willingly gave himself up to the Citadel in order to broker peace between the two kingdoms. They then likely put the prince through the Silk Siphon, and by some means split his soul in two in order to power both constructs. Hornet notes this in her personal journal, where she says the soul inhabiting both automatons seems singular. And with that, we've covered most of the major questions regarding silkflies. It all paints a pretty bleak picture for these bugs, doesn't it? They work however many centuries serving the Citadel while alive, being borderline tortured in any number of ways, and then when they aren't of use anymore, they're killed, trapped, and farther used, even in death, for centuries longer. And possibly the worst part, it seems, in silkfly form at least, they live for an insanely long time. The flies that were left behind in ancient areas like Carmelita's Kingdom have probably been trapped for thousands of years at this point. I've seen some people theorize that in this form they still feel the pain from being in the siphon, So it's entirely possible that during their time spent trapped, they've been feeling it all the entire time. No wonder they run away when we finally free them. However, to end on some semblance of a positive note, it is very likely silkflies do have a lifespan and actual death. In only 2 places over the entire kingdom do we find lamps containing a small pile of dust. Maybe, hopefully, silkflies do have a peaceful future. And though it may take thousands of years enduring constant torture, perhaps they have real, true freedom waiting for them on the other side.